Hello, I'm Milan. I'm going to be chatting around COVID-19 and what it means for South Africa's tech sector. So, it is definitely a unique and massive threat to the things we do, but I also see some opportunity in that. And that's what I want to talk to you guys about today. And because of COVID-19, we are doing a video recording instead of a normal talk, and I have cunningly repurposed my studio, aka garage, for this very occasion. So I hope it works. So before I get going, I figured I'll just tell you guys briefly who I am and what OfferZen, the company I work at, does. So if you don't know us, OfferZen is a recruitment platform, a marketplace where tech professionals, developers, and data scientists can get really cool job opportunities. So my background has been in startups for a number of years. Actually, I started playing around building software in companies while studying still. So I've been involved in the kind of early days of a number of South African companies. Some that are, I think, more well known, like SnapScan. Some people know that just because it's a common payments app, or Luna, which is a cryptocurrency exchange, and then sort of a number of other startups. So I'm incredibly passionate about basically using technology to solve problems, and generally I like kind of the idea of a business model or business as the wrapper for that. So that's sort of, I guess, in a very high level, my background. I studied electronic engineering and computer science, so sort of making things and running software is the kind of like, I guess, primary way that I identify with my role in the world. Even though these days, I guess, I'm more on the sort of business side, at least at OfferZen. So before we get going, I want to take you guys back to 2014. Towards the end of the year, the Ebola crisis in West Africa had sort of really started becoming hectic. And Philip, who is my co-founder at OfferZen, and the guy wearing the ridiculous leather jacket, is here in a video explaining to one of the US news organizations at our flat, actually, what we're doing in terms of Ebola. So in 2014, we had some experience doing mobile health projects, and when the Ebola crisis came, we decided, shit, it looks really, really hectic, and it might be something that we can use our skills to help. And during this whole thing, we ended up getting sort of like building a few apps, getting things distributed, and generally trying to be helpful. So we did have like some lessons, a whole lot of what not to do, and a few wins sprinkled here and there back in 2014, which I am trying to apply today in terms of how we as a company, as an OfferZen, think about the kind of corona pandemic, and then also broadly how we can help. So just sort of to explain some of the context I've got is thinking and lessons learned back in 2014 around Ebola. The important thing I think around the chat today is the framing I have in my mind when I think of OfferZen. It really is, I think, being a tech community. There are about 90,000 South African sort of tech professionals in our network, software developers, but then also UX and UI designers, data scientists, project managers, and these people engage with us in many, many different ways. Some of them we've helped get a job, some just read our newsletter, some of them come to our events. But in general, I think it's a pretty sort of tight and vibrant community. And then on the other side, we've got a whole bunch of companies using us, sort of from startups to enterprises, sort of 1,400 plus companies actively using OfferZen to, as a source of hiring tech talent. So that's basically what OfferZen is. It's South Africa's largest tech community. And I think this is quite an important thing in terms of how we can make a difference with COVID-19. Okay, so before kind of jumping into things like the opportunity presented by COVID-19 or something, I think the super good reality check is that COVID-19 is pretty freaking bad. It's bad for you, on a personal health level and on economic level. So I think just keeping that in mind during this whole thing is probably pretty a good perspective. So the two things that I try and keep in mind to sort of remind myself how bad this is, given that personally still it's reasonably abstract for me, something like economic meltdown or whatever is a reasonably abstract thing, and thus far at least none of my friends have gotten sick with COVID-19, so it feels abstract, but I know it isn't. I know it is very, very real. So two things I try and remember is, one is Dr. Lee over there, who was the first doctor who identified that there's a new highly contagious and very dangerous virus out. You can read up about him online, and the important thing is he died from the virus he was trying to warn all of us about. So that's a pretty big reality check for me. And then something which kind of struck me a lot more than exchange rates or market indices falling or whatever is this unemployment stat from the New York Times, where last week 3.3 million Americans kind of filed unemployment claims, and you can sort of see previous numbers, even in 2008, and so the unemployment is sort of in this hundreds of thousands band, maybe heading up to 600,000, and then last week it's totally off the charts, 3.3 million humans filing unemployment claim, which is sort of, if you just think how many people that is already impacted way before the kind of virus on a health level has reached its peak in America. It's sort of summary, COVID-19 is really bad, and it's really bad for you on an individual level, and it's sort of not to be underestimated. So inside OfferZen, we basically said, look, this is a state of war. We as individuals, a company, a country, and an entire world face sort of an existential threat to our way of life. And a very practical way of showing that is right now we can't get out of our houses. That's a huge, huge negative impact on our quality of life. So that type of impact is way more severe for a whole lot of people who are already sick with COVID, and will sort of impact more and more people for a longer period of time. So we basically said, okay, guys, this is an existential threat to our way of life. So in typical product team fashion, the dev team at OfferZen said, okay, great, guys, what does that mean for our dev team? And I think a lot of us are thinking that it's okay, this is pretty bad, this is crazy, but practically, I'm a coder. What does it mean for me? What do I do? How do I think about it? And that's really what this talk is about. So, I guess the starting point for this is to go, okay, when things get bad, when shit hits the fan, what does that look like, and what do you do about it in this kind of crisis? So I think us as a tech community, this graph illustrates the kind of impact of Corona, and really, so what you're looking at here is a normalized, so out of a normal baseline view of the number of companies that are sending interview requests on OfferZen. So now the sample is hundreds and hundreds of companies. So it's pretty robust in that sense across industries. And you can see week on week, there's a kind of accumulates day on day. So you can see, let's say the week of the 24th of Feb, that's the yellow line. You can see sort of on a Monday when a batch goes live, you get about 53% of the companies who will be sort of hitting the total, sending interview requests on the Monday, and then it kind of goes up all the way to that week was 98% of the normalized baseline. The next week was our baseline exactly at 100%. So you sort of have this cumulative running total over a week. And then 16 March is when sort of on an economic level, I think one could say Corona hit the SA tech industry. So you'll see this graph doesn't show anything on the Friday, but it basically stopped at 50%. So effectively within the span of a week, the number of companies hiring tech professionals just halved on our platform. And as I said, it's a pretty large sample, so it's reasonably representative, I think, of the tech ecosystem in South Africa. So effectively overnight, we sort of had a halving of our industry. So that's a pretty huge thing. And if you're wondering what happened next, the simple answer is it's roughly stayed at that level. The weeks since have all basically followed that green line, and effectively it's like the SA tech industry has been halved since 16 March. Now that's pretty radical if you think how many people and how many companies you're talking about. So when this happened, I was like, wow, okay, this is really, really bad. Like, that means a huge amount of companies are under strain. And sort of the thing I did is I said, I've got to phone my friends, like phone a few other people in the space, figure out what's going on, figure out what we can do. And so Sunday evening, I WhatsApped a few people and sort of a whole mix of people who I thought could help. So Asha, who's the CEO of Sweep South, Haman and Dan, they make the legendary Eskom app, the devs behind that, and then Davina, who's a friend of mine, who's the head of digital at Investec. So those are some of the people I WhatsApp and I said, hey, I think this COVID-19 thing is going to have a huge impact on South Africa's tech ecosystem. Do you want to join a group? Let's discuss what we can do and how we can help people. And they were all really, really keen. And then while I was doing this, by chance, I logged in to LinkedIn, which I very rarely do. And I had a message from an old friend, Willem Fourie, who's now Professor Willem. And he basically asked me, do we, as an OfferZen, have capabilities which could slow COVID spread in South Africa? Now that's like, wow, okay, that's a pretty broad and difficult question. And I also noticed he's now at the SDG hub at the University of Pretoria. So he's sort of asking for real reasons. I was like, oh, wow, shit, okay. I have no idea, but I think what I'll do is just phone more friends. So what I did is I started WhatsApping people and getting them to WhatsApp more people, all in the tech ecosystem, all people who can help. And very soon, we had a huge amount of people who were in a group discussing stuff they can do, like how can the tech industry help, and basically leverage what we have to sort of help South Africa broadly and the tech ecosystem in terms of handling COVID-19. So suddenly we had all of these people keen to help and started sketching out, what would that look like? A data model. We suddenly had this idea of like volunteers keen to help. There's a whole lot of info about them. We figured we'd probably want to drive projects. People had a whole lot of ideas of projects and things. So we're using Miro. It's like a virtual whiteboarding thing to map all of this out. And the standard thing you think as a coder is, okay, what I need to do now is, spin up Rails in my case, and basically build a basic CRUD app. And that is actually how OfferZen started. Philip and I basically spun up a Rails instance and just started hacking away on a basic CRUD app. But what I have learned over the years is that, well, that's pretty fun and awesome. isn't necessarily the best way to very, very quickly get something reasonably robust out. So the one trick we've learned from Stephen, who's our VP of growth, is that using kind of no code or low code platforms, especially for prototyping, can be really, really cool. So he helped us and he set up a knack app, which is basically like a no-code platform where you literally pick on a drop-down, hey, this is my data model, these are my views and things like that. So you might be thinking, well, no self-respecting coder would use a tool like that. But what is absolutely awesome with using something like that to just get started is you don't have to worry about, data security, privacy, it's GDPR compliant, auth works, all of that stuff. And you're not focused on the code. You can basically 100% focus on the problem you're trying to map and solve. So in a crazy situation like this, if you're sort of trying to build a thing, starting off with a tool like Knack or some other no-code platform or whatever you want to use to just really, really quickly prototype your basic concept works well. So what we did is we built a very, very simple Knack app where we could firstly group everyone in the WhatsApp group, because suddenly it had escalated to 40 plus people and was becoming unmanageable. So we pulled everyone in to the Knack app with bios and things to make it easier to understand what's going on. And that was a pretty good start. For reference, we now on Tuesday after starting to ping people on Sunday, last Tuesday. Then one of the key projects that came out from Willem's message after I started chatting with him is the idea of a vulnerability map. Basically trying to figure out which communities in South Africa would be most badly affected by COVID-19. So that involves analyzing a bunch of variables. Could be the age of the community, the healthcare resources, socioeconomic conditions and everything of effectively the whole country, mapping that on top of each other, and then figuring out where COVID-19 would have kind of the most devastating impact. And that map would allow the government to better allocate healthcare resources and sort of preemptively get ready for things. So that was basically the first project we jumped on, is trying to map out these vulnerable communities. And all of this being driven by our Hacky Knack app, which kind of implements our data model and everything. So set the project requirements up in there and then asked for volunteers. And fortunately, we got a huge amount of very passionate people from the tech community who immediately jumped in and said, hey, I'm keen to help. I can help code or do some data analysis. I've got GIS tooling, or I've got this data set we can use. And so we got a huge amount of volunteers very, very quickly, sort of within hours, which is really awesome. And we set up a subcommunity around those people. So it sounds very fancy. What it meant is we made a new WhatsApp group and started sharing the problem statement, discussing that, and setting up a few calls to actually get things built. If I recall, I think by Wednesday, we had a sort of first version of the mapping out, and Willem could present it at the union buildings to the guys from the Office of the Presidency. And that got sort of worked really, really well. They suddenly had a pretty good idea of which communities to focus on, and they were super excited that they could get this answer so quickly. And we were thinking, great, that's awesome. Tech community helped out. Good job. Guys like Andries from Riskscape, put a huge amount of effort in and volunteered a lot of time and tooling to get this done. So that was pretty awesome. What happened next was quite interesting. Is Constance, or Dr. Mabela, she is the lady on the right at the back, WhatsApped me and said, hey, I was in this presentation that Willem did around the vulnerability mapping, and it was pretty cool and useful. Could you guys help us more? Could you have a chat? I work with Dr. Amagopa. He's the guy in the front in the orange shirt. One thing I noticed then is, other than basically myself and Tumi in the picture there in the middle next to me, pretty much everyone else is a professor or a doctor of some kind, which is quite funny. But she basically said, hey, could you come up, meet us in Pretoria, and basically chat around how we as the government and the presidency can work more with the tech community. And we invited Willem along because he'd sort of helped us get going on the vulnerability map, and we were very excited to work with him. So that discussion happened, I think, on the Thursday, and we had a quick telecon on the Friday with the two of them to figure out what's what, and then Tumi and I got on a plane on Saturday morning early to go and see them and discuss kind of how we do this. And we had a really good chat where we kind of got a much better understanding of how the government was thinking about the problem, of kind of the key issues they'd identified, and the ways like that we jointly thought, we could help, that the tech community could play could play its part and sort of do things that have positive impact in this whole madness that is COVID-19. So it was a really good chat, really good meeting, and we learned a lot. And then the next step was that we got an official request from the Presidency of South Africa saying basically, hey, please help. And please ask the rest of the tech community to join you and help. And kind of what the request was really about was kind of like four things. So firstly, like, hey, please raise awareness and kind of get the support of the tech community for these problems. Then work with us, work with the government to identify projects that can help help respond to the crisis. And then for these projects, recruit and coordinate volunteers from the tech community to kind of help solve them, and make sure that these community members are connected to the right government partners in the kind of various units inside the South African government. So that on a high level was effectively the mandate that we got given. And then in an awkward preemption, we decided to call the project Unlockdown. That was before the lockdown was actually announced. We thought it was hilarious at the time. It obviously rapidly became less hilarious, but so we launched Project Unlockdown as a way to sort of recruit volunteers from the tech community, figure out what problems would have high impact if they're solved, and then coordinate volunteers and try and help solve them. And we basically now have about 6 people dedicated from OfferZen kind of volunteering on this thing, and hundreds of people at this stage from the community who've jumped in and said they're keen to help. So the sort of entry point is once again our knack app, where volunteers can sign up, provide a bit of details, say kind of the skills they have and what they can do, and then wrote a blog post which basically explained all of this, explained the meeting in Pretoria, explained the kind of request for help, and just asking the community, whoever is able to volunteer, to sort of please sign up. We then also set out and kept discussing what other projects are sort of like most impactful, could be most impactful to the government's ability to respond to the crisis. And then of course sort of like recruiting volunteers from the community to help out. So sort of examples of projects that we've worked on since the vulnerability mapping is one active project is track and trace, which is basically to figure out the sort of transmission path of COVID-19 from people who've got infected and to basically try and prevent the spread from spiraling out of control. And then the other project we're working on, which is sort of a meta project pulling a whole load of maker communities together, is around rapidly manufacturing medical equipment, where you guys might be aware there are quite a lot of communities in South Africa working on things like 3D printing ventilators and whatever. And we decided the thing we could do is try and pull all of that together, make sure those communities get connected to the people inside the kind of government and medical sector who need the equipment and understand the needs, and make sure sort of everyone's aware of the different efforts and can help out where needed. And then some of the projects that I've personally been involved in quite a lot is around the economic problems and potential of the current situation. So on the problem side, the kind of economic impact of COVID-19 is incredibly severe and negative in South Africa, kind of across all industries. As I showed you from OfferZen's data, we can see the effect on the tech industry, but I mean, that's obviously even more true at this point with the lockdown for things like restaurants. It's massively disruptive to manufacturing and all of those things. So COVID-19 is creating huge economic damage. And part of our projects are around tracking that and helping the government and private sector understand how they can sort of help, help small businesses and whatever keep afloat and fight this. But then on the other side, we're also saying COVID-19 is effectively changing the world. And it's like suddenly everyone is working remotely. Everyone's got to figure out how remote tooling works. Companies, for example, companies that have generally said, oh, it's not a thing they want to do, are now forced to suddenly do it. So a whole load of like new opportunities are being created. And I personally think there's a huge opportunity for like new companies to be formed. This has generally been true of sort of bad economic times. So a number of really successful companies generally tend to get started in an economic downturn. This specific economic downturn has the additional fact that it literally changes on a very real way how individuals live. Like we're all stuck at home at the moment. That has a huge impact in terms of actually changing day-to-day life for people. And I think that change basically is can be seen as opportunity, kind of if you put the right effort and mindset to it. So in terms of how I generally think about converting threat to opportunity, and I think if one is, let's say, thinking around building products or even a company, a startup in this kind of environment, like, how do you want to think about it? So I think the most important thing is to firstly acknowledge this is a threat. This is something serious and seriously bad. So the first step is just make sure you survive. That kind of means, remaining physically healthy, resting, getting exercise, even if it's in your home, and sort of functional in terms from a work context. So that could be as an individual, making sure you're set up correctly and you can code or whatever at home. Or in my case, like I spent a lot of time thinking about our team at OfferZen and making sure that we can remain functional when we're all at home, and our customers are all at home. Like, how do we remain functional as a company and make sure we can still help people get tech jobs during all of this? It's like, I think like many companies, that problem we face is even more sort of important now. As I showed on the numbers earlier, the tech industry is under massive pressure. So it's absolutely critical that we manage to do our job well now. And I think once you've ticked off that first step, and you're sort of in a stable position where you're okay and sort of survival is okay, what I find is the best next thing to do is to just see how can you help others. Not not to even ask the kind of, hey, I want to help someone and you're at a profit off it yet. But if you have the luxury to put time in, and most people would at least have a little bit of time in a day or over a weekend to figure out how can you just help other people in this crisis situation. I find that firstly it's like a nice thing to do and it kind of helps keep you sane, but I also think it helps you make that transition from being under threat to seeing opportunity. There's something about helping other people that kind of changes your mindset. I think it kind of opens you up to new possibilities and ideas. And what I've found is when I'm in the mode of kind of helping people and trying to create value for others, you kind of get a peek with that open mindset into what the future will be like. So what I find super interesting around the work we've done thus far is just seeing how ad hoc communities spring up now and really, really rapidly solve problems. Like the tooling we're using, the way we think about it is super, super interesting. Gabby, my brother's partner, is like at home with us now, busy trying to figure out how to make a primary school, kind of like a small, very small primary school that usually runs out of a house, work remotely, and sharing learnings there. And it's a strange kind of like glimpse very, very rapidly of what the future could be like. And then I think the sort of final step is if you're in a solid spot where you're surviving and functional, you're in the mindset of helping others and you're kind of engaging with the world, you're observant, learning effectively in this case, like what the future is going to be like, what rapid changes are happening, to then say, hey, what is missing? What are the pain points that people in this new future are experiencing, and like how do I build that? What's missing? Like how do I solve that gap that exists? And I think it's that last bit that often is the seed of a super, super like impactful company. So if you sort of go through these 4 steps, and then you can map companies like startups that have now become very large onto this and sort of look at their history, and very often you can see this, I think, basic pattern. So I'd recommend like this as a mindset. If you're interested in either building a new product or even an entire new company, the trick is around converting this feeling and reality of being under threat into a feeling and a reality of opportunity, centered around firstly survival, then helping others, then you leveraging that help really to learn, and then finally to build towards that like future you're experiencing. And then also sort of just a shameless plug, if you are looking to help, consider the Unlockdown project. We are volunteering quite a lot of time and effort into it, and there are a bunch of really, really good people who are putting in effort, and it's like massively impactful projects for our country. So if you've got the ability to sort of help and volunteer, we'd really, really appreciate it. Cool, but I'll chat with you guys in the Q&A now. Thank you so much for your time.